Hello and welcome to the Extreme Perspectives podcast. We bring you conversations with the people who see things differently and think differently. The innovators, outliers, misfits, rebels, and the crazy ones from the Sense Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Brown. I seek out extreme perspectives of people who want to change things and push the human race forward. Together, we collaborate with the world's most innovative companies to help them be more innovative. Today, we're talking to the misfit, comedy writer, artist, creative director, filmmaker, and host of the LGBTQ+ podcast Outvertising, Joanne Oates. Keep listening as we discuss how to come up with ideas faster, making creative projects happen and being yourself, and how to become more creative by being a sponge and seeking feedback to make your ideas stronger. Hi Joe, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, good. So I'm really excited about it. It's great to talk to you.
Well, I know that you're a more seasoned podcaster than me, so it's a privilege to talk to you today as well. So thank you. Just to get us started, could you tell us who you are, where you're from, what you're all about, and most importantly, are you an outlier, misfit, rebel, or a crazy one?
Okay, so who am I? So I'm Joanne Oates. I'm a freelance creative director, mainly working in advertising. I've got about 20 years experience in advertising and marketing, but also media and broadcasting. I was formerly a journalist, written for many marketing and media and LGBTQ+ titles, and also was the news editor of Gaydar Radio. I now host the Outvertising podcast for LGBTQ+ advertising and media advocacy group Outvertising. So I speak to loads of inspirational people from our industry, and I'm also an artist, filmmaker and comedy writer. So lots of things. As for whether one of those I am, I really thought about this and I instinctively picked misfit. And I always have to double check the meanings of things because sometimes I do use the wrong words. I think that's just my creative brain going into overdrive. And it was interesting to me that misfits specifically, it's that their behavior sets them apart in an uncomfortable way. And I thought, not sure about that because I'm someone who doesn't like making people feel uncomfortable. However, I know that my crazy career path and my eclectic CV have certainly made some people feel uncomfortable in the past. So maybe it does fit me quite well.
Well, it's great to meet a misfit today. So there's a lot of different job titles you've had. And one of the things, we talk about a lot is that job titles can no longer really define us. But there was something you mentioned about a comedy. You've just recently produced and released that.
Yes. I've always been a huge fan of comedy. And one of the things that's been part of my life for about the last sort of 10, 15 years is I've been writing comedy with my creative partner, who happens to be my husband as well, Mark Winter. And when we both met, we were both doing a bit of stand-up on the London comedy circuit, just very, he was more involved in it than me. And we started writing together back then, but we only really started taking it seriously about 10 years ago. And we've written sort of shorts and sitcom scripts, and we're currently working on a comedy drama. But as anyone will know who's been involved in any kind of screenwriting, it's a bit of a long game to try and get things out there and get them produced. So, the best thing to do is just make something yourself. And so we, through our advertising work, we met up with a little production company called The Big Sky, who were mainly known for sort of documentary and corporate films, but were really keen to do some more narrative stuff. And we sort of shared sort of some sort of comic chops with them. So we just sort of pitched this idea to them, and it was loosely based on an ornament that Mark's family owned, which is a bronze Meiji era Japanese tiger. And it's been in their family for a long time, but absolutely nobody knows or knew where it was from or how it was acquired. Sort of a myth about whether it was cursed or like what it's made of. And we started to find that quite interesting in this respect that a lot of families have these myths in their in their sort of heritage around objects and stories, and no one's quite sure what the truth is. So we just built this whole story around that. Wrote a 10-minute short, shot it on a next to nothing budget, and yeah, we're doing the film festival circuit last year. It picked up a few awards. It features a great female lead cast, including Jess Foster-Q, who was up for one of the Edinburgh Awards, Edinburgh Comedy Awards last year. So we're really, really chuffed with that. So yeah, and it's great because it means that, you know, when we're pitching ideas now, we can show that film to people and go, this is the sort of thing we can do off our own back. But so they've got an idea of our comedy and our writing style. So I would thoroughly recommend anyone who's trying to get any kind of project off the ground to just actually get out there and make it themselves. There's a lot of value in that, and you learn so much as well about the process.
DIY culture, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can rely on yourself to get it done.
And that's why the Sense Network's great, because you've got like thousands of people who can do all these jobs, like to pull together to create things. I think that's what's so fantastic about collectives like that. That's
amazing. And if people want to watch that, they can find it on YouTube.
It's on YouTube. Don't Sell the Tiger. I'm sure we'll link to it in the show notes or whatever. But yeah, it's or they can just look at my website, joanneoates.com, and you'll find it on there as well.
So I've got a quick question about stand-up.
Yeah.
Because there was a friend of mine, I think he might have been a copywriter in advertising. Maybe this is a thing that goes on.
It is a thing.
And he was saying to me, you might be able to clarify this, that when you do stand-up, you have this character that you become, or you sort of have this character in your head. I mean, I remember him telling me his was the lazy man. So he was just very lazy. So all of his whole thing revolved around that. What was your routine?
When I was doing it, well, let's just say, when I was doing it, I was sort of in my mid to late 20s. I was single. I was doing a lot of dating. So a lot of my stand-up revolved around that. And just taking situations that you find yourself in when you're dating or you meet someone, and just sort of finding the weirdness in the situations. Like, I remember I had a load of jokes about the fact when you end up staying at someone's house, you can't work their shower, and it's really embarrassing. Water pressure in London's really like rubbish. So, it's really difficult to get a good shower when you don't know how to work it. And it was just going off on these tangents about not really about the dating itself, but about the weirdness around it. So that was kind of my thing.
That's fascinating, because I think one of the things that, I mean, maybe this is because you're writing ads and targeting people, but a lot of the work that we do as well is like creating personas, because you can kind of have that empathy and you can kind of create those worlds and you can design things that are more engaging for people, right? If you can kind of project those sort of personalities. Well, thank you for clarifying that. It wasn't just a one-off. I can start.
No, it was also, I totally recommend on that reading Frank Skinner's biography, because he talks about the fact that when he started doing stand-up, he tried to be someone else and like put on a kind of persona, and then he tried to be himself, and that didn't get as many laughs. But in the end, over time, he created this sort of fused kind of person, his stand-up persona. And I think that only actually comes with practice, because a lot of people, when they start out, try and be something else. They try and be like who that they think people want them to be. It's like a lot of artistic pursuits. You think you try and create something you think is marketable or will appeal to people, rather than finding your true voice. It just takes time.
So just I'd be really intrigued to learn a little bit more about the meandering journey and the different hats you've worn, because you had quite a long list in the introduction there. So what does that journey look like over time?
Well, I had a year out before I went to university, because my family moved from Essex, Leigh-on-Sea in Essex, to London. And I didn't want to go to university immediately. I wanted to kind of enjoy the fact that I had, London to myself for a year. So I just did some PA job for a year, and went and did history of art, design and film at Middlesex. But unfortunately, when I came out of university, I had huge amounts of debt, and it was just like, guess any job will do. And I just, I want to work. I don't want to work in the media, but I don't really know where to start. And I ended up in a direct marketing agency, and so that's how I fell into marketing. But that forged a path with me very much being an account handler, so it wasn't particularly creative. So I was just dealing with clients basically. And then over time, I was just trying to change careers and change departments to get nearer to the creative department. So I worked in production, I was a project manager, creative traffic. And then I think it got to the stage where I'd actually remembered that when I was a teenager, I really wanted to be a journalist. And so I went off and did my NCTJ, which is journalism qualification, and started doing some freelance journalism, and eventually got jobs in journalism, and was mainly actually writing about the media and marketing. So I was using my experience from advertising and marketing agencies. And then I got the opportunity to go and work in radio, which is when I went to Gaydar Radio, and I was the news editor, and that was huge amounts of fun. It was very stressful because I'd not worked in radio before, and it was a bit of a baptism of fire. And anyone who ever listened to any of my news reports will know that it wasn't perfect at all times. But I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed talking to people about their stories, and I really enjoyed sharing their stories, because one of the wonderful things about Gaydar was that we had people from all over the world listening, particularly from countries where being gay is still illegal and has a death penalty. And we used to get people emailing in and saying, you know, this is my only connection, or only like feeling that I'm not alone. And so that felt like, although we were a dance music station, that we were actually doing something that was of value and had a purpose. Sadly, that job came to an end during sort of credit crunch about 12 years ago. And I spent about a year kind of trying to work out what the hell I was going to do, and then ended up coming back into advertising as a copywriter. And yeah, I sort of found my feet, because it just kind of like had all this experience in the industry prior to being a journalist, but I had all this writing experience from being a journalist. So I was able to kind of fuse the two things together. And because I was a bit older and had a bit more just general life experience, sort of fell into a really good digital agency, Digitas, and had a few years there, learned a lot because I hadn't really done any digital advertising before that point. And then I went freelance, and that was about 7 years ago, and I've been freelance ever since, and moved more into a hybrid creative role, so more art direction and creative direction. And yeah, I've worked at, I think I've lost count of the number of agencies I've worked at in London and Manchester across the board. So like Adam and Eve, DDB and Havas and RGA, all of these big agencies. So yeah, lots of experience gained along the way. So.
And it sounds as if the journalism and the radio experience has led you to your podcast.
Yeah, and I think for a while I'd sort of felt like I haven't been so LGBTQ plus rights have always been important to me. I identify as bisexual myself, and I felt like I hadn't really been doing anything to support the community in the way that I had been when I was working at Gaydar. So advertising, which was previously called Pride AM up to about a year or so ago, had started to do more with agencies. And they'd reached out to Bloom UK, which is a women's communication network I'm involved in. And they wanted to get more women involved in advertising. And I got involved, got talking to Mark Runnicus, who's the chairman, who also, it turned out, had a radio background. He worked on Radio Trent in Nottingham about sort of 20 odd years ago. And we just started talking about podcasts, and I was just like, why don't you guys have a podcast? I mean, this just seems like we want to promote representation and share people's stories and inclusion. We should be sharing those stories with the people we know who work in the industry. And he said, yeah, brilliant, why don't you do it? So that's, we've been doing it for about a year now. We've had some amazing stories on there from people, coming out for the first time, not necessarily young people coming out who their colleagues don't know are out, We've had people talking about their HIV status for the first time. We don't just have LGBTQ plus people, we have very prominent allies. We have Pete Markey, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of TSB. He's a huge diversity ally. So that was a really interesting conversation. And we talked about the lack of female representation at LGBTQ plus networks, the lack of representation generally across the board. So yeah, it continues, it's growing and growing. I mean, we've started to look a little bit outside the UK landscape. There's been a lot of issues in Poland over the summer with the right-wing government being re-elected, and LGBT community over there suffering a lot of discrimination, violence and hatred towards them. So we recently spoke to Martin Kmiecik, who was born in Poland but runs a diversity organisation over here. So he has a lot of insights into what's going on there. So that was a really interesting conversation. And that's just growing and growing. So it takes, as you know, with doing podcasts, it takes time. And, you know, we're all volunteers at advertising, but I get a huge amount out of it as well as what I put in. So, I continue to hopefully make that a bigger thing as we go on.
And you can find that on...
wherever you get your podcasts,
wherever
basically.
You get your podcasts.
So Spotify, Google, Apple. We're also on, if you look on advertising, if you just search for advertising in any of the social channels, you'll see us there, and we post all our episodes on there as well.
It is an exceptionally good name.
Yeah, there was some debate about it, because it's, if you don't, because I've got a bit of an Essex glottal stop drawl, and if I don't enunciate, it does just sound like advertising. So the reason why we called it that was because there was a guide that we've been producing for about 5 years now called The Advertising Guide. It's an annual report on the state of the industry's diversity and inclusion. And that guide's become quite prominent. So it just felt like that was the lead message, and that we should run with that as the title of the organisation.
And that report, what sort of, what are you measuring? What are the important things that you're looking for?
Yeah, so it's like key campaigns that we've felt throughout the year have been really great at representing diversity and a diverse group of people. We're also looking at data sort of gleaned from various sources. There'll be a new one coming out, I think, in the new year. You can go on the website and download for free the current guide. And we go in and present it to agencies. When they're going through the creative briefs and they're coming up with new ideas, they're keeping LGBTQ plus inclusion at front of mind, because, you know, it's super important. And it's also, you know, it's been shown that, you know, the more diverse audiences are being covered in adverts, the more people actually find them appealing. There's always going to be things like the most recent Argos ad, which caused a bit of a stink about having a same-sex couple in it. And like the Renault ad had a same-sex couple in it. There's always going to be people who don't like those things, but, you know, we need to be pushing to have more inclusion and, you know, represent better the diverse people in the UK.
And over the years you've been doing it, is progress being made?
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly seeing more agencies and more brands sort of thinking about it. I know myself from going in and working in all these agencies that the progress being made internally is slow. I mean, just, you know, when you go into a lot of creative departments, there aren't enough women, there aren't enough people of colour, there aren't enough people who feel comfortable about being out. But that's changing, and there's some agencies that do it really well. And I think it's just about making sure they understand the importance of it. I mean, there's a commercial benefit to it, particularly when you look at the sort of 16 to 30-year-old category. Those consumers, if you want to call them that, they want to see what you know, a diverse range of people, because that's what their friends look like.
Yeah.
And so there is change happening, but it's slow. But it's positive. That's all I would say.
That's good. That's why I asked you. You know, it's always interesting to get an insider's view on whether that progress or whether there's still resistance, and you come up against that. Do you talk to clients as well? Do you get out to the clients, because ultimately it's their briefs that are coming into the agencies?
Yeah, I mean, there is always different clients, and there are some clients that go, yeah, we want to be progressive and we want to be seen as this. I mean, TSB is a good example because that's part of who their brand is, you know. There's always going to be clients, naming no names, who say they want to be progressive externally, but actually then when you're working on their briefs, it's like, oh, we want to be risky, but not too risky. You know, we've still got this kind of core audience, and they wouldn't like that kind of thing. So you are constantly having to push. And, you know, I'll be honest, that's, as a freelancer, that's quite difficult because, you know, you're always trying to work out what the politics are and where the parameters are and how much you can push the boat with certain things. So, but, you know, it's kind of my job as, you know, the host of the advertising podcast to be doing that. And I think the more vocal I can be doing that and the more obvious I can be into being an advocate in that way, it feels like it's authentic. I think it's when sometimes there's a bit of a problem where people are pushing for things, but they're not pushing for them authentically, like they're not telling the story from the right point of view. So there's always a balance to be struck, but we shouldn't stop trying. I think that's the main message I would have.
Absolutely, fully support that. Your role as a freelancer, do you position yourself as someone can help on specifically those types of briefs, or?
Yeah, I mean that's you know part of my offering, if you like. But you know, I think actually just there's lots of things. I mean, also just being a woman. I mean, very recently, so I work with my partner. He's male, a straight man, and so quite a lot of the time you are up against a lot of all male teams. That's you know that's kind of a given. But I do think that what I've seen actually in the last 6 months even is that agencies reaching out, and whilst they can't specifically say, oh, we want to have a female team or we want to have a mixed team, that does seem to be the conversations you end up having when you get on the job. It's like, oh, we really wanted to have a male and female team on this so that we had sort of two perspectives. And I mean, I'm of the view that anyone should be able to work on anything. But sometimes there are certain things where you feel like, oh, well, you're only going to have a unique perspective on that if you've either got experience in it or you've just had, you know, you've had some experience in life that might be able to add value to the storytelling.
I think that point you make there is really what's at the essence. And we've been writing a lot about cognitive diversity, and we've been pulling this together. And there was a good piece we found in the Harvard Business Review, which talks about cognitive diversity and how they define that. And to your point there, it's about perspective, but then it's about how your processing style as well. And those are two determining factors. And that perspective, you said, can come from those life experiences.
Yeah,
that's just so valuable. Well, you know, first and foremost, it can create some empathy, which is, I know, a word that we all hear a lot. It's a bit like hearing the word authentic 20 years ago. It certainly wore itself out, and, you know, empathy's come through now. But the idea of mixing it up, I think we're just at the beginning. I think, you know, these conversations that you're creating and the awareness you're raising is just so important, because you can't have one-dimensional views anymore. You've got to have, you know, many different views, and that for me is sort of almost the logical progression of where we're going. But there's a lot of very important things that need to be done. The piece around perspectives and teams, I just think, yeah, I mean, for so long it has been very one-dimensional, a very particular view on the world, and it's rare that gets disrupted. And I just think the creative industries, more than anything else, would benefit so much from that bit being sort of shaken up a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been booked on a job, and that's when I've worked with Mark or on my own, where I've turned up and I've been the only woman on a project, and there's 10 other guys, freelance creatives on it. And that's in recent years. And usually, and then it's for a household product where, you know, women often are the deciders of what gets bought. And it's just sort of taken till now to people to go, oh, right, yeah, we don't want some people who have just been through ad school, who are white and male and straight, maybe we want some other thought processes on this.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy, but yeah, I mean, that's what needs to change across the board. Because the thing is, I never went to ad school. I worked in advertising and marketing before I became a creative, but you know, I've worked in journalism. That's a whole different thing. I've dabbled in comedy. I've done all sorts of things, and all those experiences have allowed me to have different thought processes. This is someone who, you know, went to did advertising at university, went straight into a internship, and have worked in that agency for 10 years. So I think it's just inviting all types, all peoples, all ways of thinking and all experiences into the room.
Well, that's certainly what we're trying to do with the Sense Network.
Yeah.
is getting those voices from the edges rather than the mainstream voices. I mean, sometimes I think about new ideas. When you bring them into the world, you almost need to immunize them. It's a little bit like, you know, a pinch of dirt is good for you because it kind of builds up your immune system. And I think it's a similar thing with ideas. And the more perspectives that those ideas can be bombarded with, the stronger they become. It like builds up their immune system for those ideas to survive in the wild, if you like, on their own. And it's through that process of that feedback that you get. I mean, could call it research, but it's just not as much fun to call it research. It's, you know, feedback, because it's just about having a conversation. Even when you look at these guys who you think have got very single-minded visions and they've done it all on their own, no, they've probably got a group of people, they're trusted friends who are going to tell them an idea is completely crap, or they're going to either build on this, or they're going to stretch it, or they're going to challenge it. And I just don't think there's enough of that.
Yes, and one thing I've been really enjoying getting involved with the Sense Network is the creative intelligence course that I've just been experiencing, which has been really great, because just getting people together they've been all over the world, you know, setting us little challenges. And some of them, you know, they've challenged me because I've thought, oh, why am I thinking about this? And then you start something and then some new thoughts come. And then I'm thinking about some other project over here that's stimulated a thought for. And I just love this idea of like stretching your mind in all these different ways and finding new ways to do that. And I'm a big advocate of making sure that everybody has those opportunities to do that, whether you work in the creative industry or not, you know, whether you have a creative job title or you work in a creative company. It's really important that we can all kind of feel we can stretch our minds and open them up to new things and new thoughts.
I know there's another project, like you're not busy enough with everything else, but you've got a project that's about to launch. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And it goes back to what I was just saying about, you know, obviously I've said, you know, I've worked in advertising, I've worked in marketing, I've worked as a journalist, I've worked on radio. I just love learning about things. And my dad, when I was growing up, whilst neither of my parents was particularly creative, that's changed now. My mother has recently sort of become an artist. My dad always said, be a sponge. And that didn't mean nick cigarettes off your friends. It meant soak everything up, because you don't know when you might need it. And I think I took on board what he said, and he was a big fan of buying us educational presents for kids for Christmas, on top of, like, you know, the Cindy house or the, you know, Star Wars toys or whatever. He would buy something educational from him, and it would be like a fun book about art or something to do with writing or whatever. And I really took that on board. And I remember he's a big fan of just reading pamphlets or trade journals or things like that. And I've taken that on board. And the thing is, all this useless information goes into your head. But for me, that's like data that goes in, and then I don't know what's going to come out. And I think that's really exciting. So what I've started to do, and what I started to do at the beginning of the year, was write down all the ways that I got to an idea. Now that might seem like, well, how do you come up with ideas? Because sometimes it's just a subconscious thing and you have no idea how they pop into your head. But I always knew that there were some little things that I did that were sort of instinctive, And there were tricks that I'd learned from other people in advertising or in journalism, or, even like I play guitar, so learning the guitar, or just little things or stuff I'd read about, and started making a list. And I thought, oh, what, it'd be really lovely to share these with people, like just a sort of as a collection of blog posts. So I'm launching this thing called fasterideas.com. And I know that title will be contentious because people go, oh, ideas that come fast aren't necessarily good. That's not the point. It's about having access to nudges and tips in a fast way, in an accessible way that doesn't require you to read a 400-page book to understand the neuroscience and understand how your mind works. It's for people who get stuck when they've got to come up with a new thought or a new way of doing something by that afternoon and just need a little bit of help. And so they can read something in sort of a couple of minutes, and it might stir something. It might not. They might just remember it for the future. So that's what I'm planning to do.
That sounds very cool, and I look forward to seeing it. Now, can I put you on the spot and ask you for a little example?
Yeah, of course. So one of my favourite things to do when I've got a copywriting task is, and it's like someone saying, "Oh, can we just have like a whole bunch of lines?" Is song lyrics. And that's not to just copy song lyrics, but song lyrics are a wealth of like phrases and wordplay, and some of the great lyricists just put words together in a way that you would never thought of. And songs are really accessible. So, you can search for song lyrics. You can just go on Spotify and just put in a word, and a bunch of song titles come up by artists that you don't even know. And you can go down these little rabbit holes, and you just don't know where it might help you come closer to an idea. And it doesn't matter whether you're working on like Bleach or you're trying to write a speech for a conference or something. It just might help you come up with a small phrase or a bite-sized thing that might just lift up what you're doing or push you in a particular direction.
Love it. I'm smiling because only this morning I was quoting Morrissey. We have a colleague who nearly always wears black, and so
I know what you're going to say.
What am I going to say?
He wears black on the outside because that is how he feels on the inside.
Exactly. And of all the days, he turned up today not wearing black. Yeah, that was good to see. But I love that. I recognise that as a really nice technique.
And there's so many others. And I'm a bit of a magpie. I've picked things up from different places. If I read an article about something, I'm like, oh, that'll be a good fast. And it could be something to do with like mathematics or sort of costume design or something like that. And I was like, oh, do you know what? You could use that in other circumstances. That doesn't necessarily have to pertain to that industry.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is exciting about it. And that's the thing about sharing it, because only people in that industry might know that trick. And that's what I've learned from working on different industries, is that you can take these experiences with you and help other people as you go by sharing them.
So I'm just going to join some dots, because that's clearly what you've been doing with the Fast Ideas. But that's exactly the piece about perspective and about processing styles. A physicist and a historian are going to have different ways of solving problems. And, it's like when you walk up to a problem for the first time, or you look at a brief for the first time, how you frame that and how you think about it can be completely different to the next person. This is why I love putting things on the wall sometimes. And someone walks into a room and they go, oh, what's that? And they'll come and trying to interpret what it is. And you'll just go, well, that's really interesting, because that's not what it is at all. But in that moment of them not knowing what it is and trying to make sense of it, that's often, that's that sort of a bleak thing. It just enters your peripheral vision and suddenly, bang, you've made a creative leap. So,
and just a point on that, I mean, also because I paint as well, and I've only recently, I belong to a few sort of art groups online, and what's been amazing about that is sharing your work with people and getting their feedback. And my stuff's very abstract, and testing out new ideas, and when you share things with people and their perspectives of what they're seeing is so completely different from what you sort of had intentions for. That's so exciting, because that means we all perceive the world so differently. and we've got so much to offer each other in terms of new thinking.
I could not agree with you more. But I wanted to ask, with Faster Ideas, that's something that's just about to come live, and I think I know myself, I'd be fascinated in diving deeper into that, and I'm sure members of the Sense Network around the world would too. Is there anything that the network could do to help you on the Faster Ideas project?
Well, I mean, as I just said, having different perspectives and different inputs is so encouraging and really exciting to do. So obviously I'm going to be sort of writing a lot of it, but there's an open invitation for collaborations, whether that be guest blog posts. I'm hopefully going to be speaking to people as things progress, sort of doing interviews with creatives, but there could also be creative thinkers from different industries, so scientists, teachers, and any industry where you have to think in a creative way or you have to use creative thinking in your job. I'm also looking at creative book reviews, so I'm not against reading books on creativity, that's not what it's about, but it's about helping share some of the best ones. So I've just actually read John Cleese's new book on creativity yesterday. So I'll be doing little book reviews, but I'm open to other people sharing their favourite creative books, because I think people have all got their favourites that they like to pass on, and just be nice to sort of hear what people like about them. But that's there's probably other things that will come. I think next year, as the world starts to open up a little bit more again, potentially there might be some events and more things we'll do. But I'm just open to having chats with people about when they start to see the content, it might sort of spark off a few ideas about how they want to get involved. So I'd really love to hear from them.
Amazing. Well, I'm sure when the time comes and we can share the link to Faster Ideas, we'll get that feedback.
Yeah.
No, amazing.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jo. That's been amazing. A really great journey, some really great topics, and thanks for sharing that, and thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Jeremy.
That brings us to the end of a great conversation with Joanne. Please check out her comedy, Don't Sell the Tiger, on YouTube, and subscribe to the Outvertising podcast wherever you subscribe to podcasts. Make sure you nurture your creative intelligence and take some inspiration too from fasterideas.com. We will be back soon with another mind-expanding and inspirational conversation. Thank you for tuning in to Extreme Perspectives from the Sense Network. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. If so, please share it with your friends. We'd also love to hear what you think, so please leave us a comment. In the meantime, you can follow us on Instagram at The Sense Network. And if you want to get hands-on, collaborate on a project to make things better and make better things for people and the planet, join the Sense Network, linked in the description. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to the next time.